we're going to talk about masonry. And masonry is when you take individual units and stack or lay them together. And so you take these building blocks, and the word modular here is in parentheses because module means we're taking equally sized pieces and combining them together. And this gray stuff in this little slot right here, that is mortar, and that's a cement-based glue. And so when the pieces are modular or man-made pieces like bricks, we make them all the same size so they stack together neatly. Sometimes though we use stone, and if it's a natural stone, then those pieces are all different sizes. And masonry is durable, meaning it'll last a long time. It doesn't rot like a piece of wood does, and it doesn't decompose. It's resistant to the sun and UV rays. It's fire resistant. Bricks and stones don't burn, and they're very strong in compression, meaning that you can stack a lot of bricks on top of the bricks below, and they resist the force and weight of the bricks and items above. Okay, so mortar is made of cement. That's the fine powder that serves as a glue, and then that gets mixed in together with sand and also some water. And the chemical admixtures are things that are added in very small amounts to improve the workability of the mortar or to possibly change the color. And there's many different types of masonry. Here's that same picture of brick, and then there's stone, and you'll see these stones are all different shapes. There's some tall ones there, and the ones on the corner are larger stones, and then mixed in here is a bunch of smaller stones. Concrete block is a really common one. These are man-made pieces. Glass block, believe it or not, it's not really structural, but this is considered a type of masonry because there's a grout that gets put in between, like a thinner version of mortar. Adobe definitely counts as a type of masonry. These are bricks that are made out of mud and straw. Sometimes we call them mud-baked bricks, especially in other parts of the world. And the use of many of these things goes back for centuries or even millennia. Clay tile, this is a terracotta tile that's been extruded out of a machine and then cut into even-sized pieces. And then this gets baked in a kiln to make it more durable and give it strength and hardness. You can see there's most likely a concrete frame that this building is built from, and the wall was actually made of stacking these up. They have these hollow spaces inside to make them very lightweight and to reduce the amount of material that's used. And so when you're making something out of masonry, you have to do it one piece at a time, right? You take one brick and then you put it, and then you pick up another brick and you put it next to it and next to it, and then it's a one at a time thing. You stack each piece one at a time. And masons are skilled, especially when they have a lot of experience, and they can work pretty quickly, but just keep in mind we're building big things like buildings or walls out of fairly small objects, right? If you think about the size of a piece of plywood, for example, compared to the size of a brick, right? A brick is about the size of your hand, and a piece of plywood is bigger than a person is. The mortar can be made, by a machine, but it can also be made just in a bucket by a person with a shovel. The trowel is a pretty small and simple piece of equipment that you need. You don't need big saws or air compressors and nail guns or cranes. You don't need customized welding equipment that requires a lot of high-powered electricity. It's basically the right kind of minerals: cement, sand, water, some very simple tools, and a lot of hard work and experience in putting these together. You can see there's a string here that's used to make sure the bricks stay level as they're placed and make a nice clean straight line. But in general, it's relatively simple, small parts, And it's also really locally available, right? Like there's clay that can be used to make bricks in almost every place in the world. There's stone in almost every place in the world. And there are some places in the world where wood is not very prevalent. We're very lucky in the West Coast in California to have access to the forests in Northern California, the forests in Oregon and Washington. The United States has a lot of natural wood resources, but there are many places in the world where they don't have the access to wood that we do, and so historically they've turned to stone and earthen materials. And one thing that you'll see about masonry is that it has been used all over the world and also in many different times. So going back thousands of years, also going back just a couple hundred years, and also currently still in use today. The most famous one is probably the pyramids. They're stacks and stacks and stacks of really large stones to make really huge objects. These are so heavy there's actually no mortar involved here. They're just dry stacked, but keeping in mind the size and scale of these stones, most of them are taller in height than a person is. And the Great Pyramids in Egypt, they are 4,500 years old, and they're still just sitting there, slowly eroding, but very slowly because stone is very durable. The Parthenon in Greece, coming from about 2,500 years ago. It's made of stone, and each column is made of segments of marble that were carved and stacked. And if you know about Greek architecture, there's a very subtle tapering and curvature to the shape of the column. And so these were created very, very precisely. And this image here is from a restoration that was happening in the year 2009. And so they had made by hand, in the same techniques that the Greeks would have used, a segment of a column that they're going to use or replace in one that's been damaged. And this plate that they're using is a steel plate, and they've scattered some really fine sand on here, and they're actually grinding this plate back and forth to smooth out the surface of the stone so that it'll match perfectly with another piece of stone that's going to sit on top of it. This is an aqueduct in Spain, and you can see the individual stones. These are cut stones. You can see they're slightly different sizes, but for example, they're all cut to the same height. And these arch pieces have been cut into an angled taper. They've all been quarried and cut and finished into the size that is needed. These are the Trulli houses in Italy, and these are a local form of housing, and it makes this cone shape. And traditionally, these are not mortared. These are stacked stones. And so it's a corbelled dome, meaning that each stone ring is slightly set in further and further as you get climbing higher and higher towards the top. And the theory is that when a tax collector was nearby back in the day, we're talking about several hundred years ago, the taxes would be levied on permanent homes. And so when the residents in this area heard that a tax collector was nearby, they would tell their friends, and their friends would start disassembling their roofs. So they were left only with an open set of walls. And when the tax collector came by, they would say, no, well, we don't have a house here. Look, there's no roof. That's not a house. I just sleep over here in the corner. Who knows if that's a true story, but it's kind of a fun story because once the tax collector left, they would take all the stones and start manually restacking them. And within a few days, you could stack your roof back together. This is the cathedral in Siena, Italy. You can see two different colors of stone here, a white and a green marble, and they're actually alternating and stacked together with a thin layer of mortar in between. This is the Alhambra in Spain. This was done in a period when there was Islamic control of this part of Spain, and you see the fantastic patterning and decoration of the many pieces that are carved. And the large picture here is the Imperial Palace in Tokyo in Japan. You can see the size and scale of these very large stones. Another Japanese traditional building here. This is a mostly wood building, but it's sitting on top of a very large stone stacked embankment. The Great Wall of China, some stone and a lot of man-made bricks, and it's thousands of years old. This is a very simple stone wall that is just stacked. You can see that they didn't take the time to carefully cut or shave the pieces, so they fit together very tightly. There's some openings. There's somebody left a bottle there. And this is a low wall that's intended to keep livestock or to keep certain animals in or out on one side or other of this wall. In Peru, the Inca peoples made amazing, fantastic carved stone walls. And the joints here are extremely precise and extremely tight. There's no mortar. They're completely stacked. But the joints are so tight that it's said in many places you can't even slide a piece of paper in between. These are some images of the San Fernando Mission in Southern California, and the mission was left abandoned for some time. And you can see when the plaster, the white plaster on the outside, when that begins to fall off, then the mud bricks are exposed to weather and to rain. And so mostly it's rain and wind erosion that can cause them to degrade, because there is no cured binding element in the brick itself. It's just baked earth with some straw, and it's baked in the sun, so it's very dry, but as it gets wet again, it tends to erode and disintegrate. This is people from the Americas making adobe bricks. You can see they're using a wood form here. And they're made just on the natural smooth dirt surface. And the form is removed after a little bit of time, and then the bricks are allowed to bake in the sun and completely dry. And then going from the southwest of the United States and Mexico all the way to the opposite side of the world, we get to a city in Yemen. It's very similar. You can see a wooden frame here, and they put the wet mud inside and smooth it with their hands. Mesa Verde is a settlement in Arizona, and we don't know tons and tons about these indigenous peoples. At one point they were called the Anasazi, but we currently call them the ancestral Puebloans. You can see they've made these amazing stone structures, but they're nestled underneath this kind of cliffside overhanging, almost like a cave kind of place. And then going down through Mexico and parts of Central America, we have all the Mayan ruins and places like Teotihuacan. These are all stone. And a modern interpretation of some of those Mesoamerican structures was done by Frank Lloyd Wright when he created custom concrete blocks and used them in Southern California to build several different houses. And these might look like they've been carved out of stone, but these were actually man-made. Frank Lloyd Wright called them textile blocks. They're the ancestor to our modern concrete block. And a lot of these were made on site, and in some cases with not the best materials and not the best quality control. And you can see that in some cases the sharp profiles and clean edges of the patterns on the blocks has begun to come apart and degrade. There was also issues with water getting inside and the rebar corroding on the inside, and significant moisture problems inside the wall. And so over time, these haven't lasted as well as one would expect. And it was somewhat of an experiment by Wright at the time. And these days, when making concrete block in a manufacturing facility, there's a lot more science and chemistry behind it and much better quality control.